Welcome to This Day in History, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that there have been more than 1,000 reported eyewitness accounts of the Loch Ness monster, even though scientists say there is no proven biological evidence that it exists? Learn that Nessie is a large green creature and considered a cryptid like Bigfoot or Sasquatch with a long neck, a snake-like head, and dark humps rising from the water. Discover that the most recent sighting of the Loch Ness monster happened on January 29, 2025, near Doris Beach in Scotland.
Every single year, there is an animal that biological science says absolutely does not exist, but it somehow generates roughly $54 million.
Yeah, which is just a staggering amount of money.
Right. I mean, it doesn't eat, it doesn't breathe, and according to environmental DNA tests, it leaves zero genetic trace in its own habitat.
Oh, nothing at all.
Yet it possesses a higher GDP than some small island nations. So, welcome to today's deep dive. If you've ever, fallen down a late-night research rabbit hole, you know the thrill of chasing a mystery.
Oh, absolutely. The internet is built on those rabbit holes.
It really is. And today, we are taking you down one of the oldest, deepest, and genuinely most profitable rabbit holes in human history.
We really are. Because we're looking at a phenomenon that has managed to survive over 1,500 years of scrutiny.
Yeah, 1,500 years.
And to understand how a myth like this actually thrives in the modern age, we are drawing from an incredibly wide array of materials for this deep dive.
We have quite the stack today.
We do. We're looking at 7th century historical texts, recent BBC News reports, zoological analyses, regional economic data, and even a philosophical excerpt from a 2018 Religious General Conference.
So the mission today is basically to figure out the engine behind the Loch Ness monster, Nessie.
Exactly.
We want to understand how a creature that scientists insist has no biological basis somehow manages to rack up over 1,000 documented eyewitness accounts.
Right. And to do that, we kind of have to move past the simple question of, whether the monster is real.
Because that's a dead end.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, we need to look at the mechanics of human perception, the actual physical changes to the Scottish Highlands, and the really profound psychology of belief.
Okay, so let's set the stage, because you probably already know the silhouette. It's the classic cryptid profile.
And for anyone who might not know, a cryptid is just an animal claimed to exist without scientific proof, like Sasquatch.
Right, exactly. So people report this large green creature with a long snake-like neck and these very distinct black humps.
Yeah, that's the iconic image.
And the accounts often describe these perfect concentric circles left on the surface of the water as the creature sinks into the dark depths of Loch Ness.
Which is such a vivid detail.
It really is. It paints a picture of like a prehistoric submarine just silently dropping out of sight.
It does. But, what's fascinating here is that the aesthetic of a surviving dinosaur is deeply ingrained in modern pop culture, right?
Sure.
But if we trace the origins back to the very first recorded encounter, the narrative looks entirely different.
Wait, really? Different how?
Well, we have to examine this 7th century text detailing the life of a highly regarded monk named Saint Columba.
The 7th century? That is way older than I think most people realize.
It is. And the biography, which is actually corroborated by ancient stone carvings from that era, places Columba on the shores of the River Ness, which feeds into the loch.
Right, and he doesn't just, spot a creature from afar either.
No, not at all.
According to the sources, he arrives to find a group of locals burying a man, and they claim this man was swimming in the water when he was attacked and killed by a water beast.
Yeah, so the stakes are immediately life and death.
Exactly. And Columba's response is astonishing to me. He doesn't tell people to stay away or panic.
Right.
He actually orders one of his own followers to jump into the water and swim across to fetch a boat.
Which seems like a wild thing to ask someone to do right after a monster attack.
Completely wild. And the text describes the follower swimming out, and almost immediately the monster surfaces. It roars, opens its jaws, and rushes toward the man.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because Columba doesn't throw a spear or try to trap it or anything like that.
No, he raises his hand, invokes the powers of heaven, and commands the beast.
Just straight up commands it.
Yeah. He tells it, "You will go no further and won't touch the man. Go back at once."
Wow.
And the creature just obeys and flees. I mean, when you read that account, it operates functionally as an ancient exorcism.
It really does.
Columba is not dealing with a rogue biological reptile. He is dealing with a supernatural force, like a demon of the water.
Exactly.
Huh.
And it reveals the cultural utility of the myth at that specific point in history.
What do you mean by cultural utility?
Well, think about it. In the 7th century, newly arriving religious figures needed to demonstrate their supremacy over local pagan beliefs.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a power move.
Precisely. Subduing a localized monster with divine authority sends a really powerful sociological message.
That makes total sense.
And once that narrative purpose was served, the monster was essentially defeated. I mean, for centuries following Columba,
Yeah.
sightings virtually vanished.
Wow, really? So it just stopped?
Yeah, the creature was basically put to sleep by the resolution of its own story.
But a myth put to sleep by its own narrative resolution usually stays asleep, right? Unless the physical environment changes so drastically that it forces the myth awake again.
Which brings us to the 20th century.
Right. Fast forward to the early 1930s. The world is changing rapidly, and it isn't a coincidence that the sightings absolutely explode in 1933.
Not a coincidence at all.
If you look at the historical timeline in our sources, that is the exact year massive infrastructure upgrades were completed on the roads surrounding Loch Ness.
The physical environment dictated the cultural resurgence.
Exactly. Workers blast away rock, cleared trees, and suddenly opened up these sweeping, unobstructed vistas of the water.
Yeah, so you're suddenly putting hundreds of fast-moving automobiles, tourists, and just general outsiders right on the water's edge.
Looking down into a notoriously deep, dark lake.
Right. The isolation of the highlands was broken.
And the moment those roads open, the reports just flood in.
They really do.
In April 1933, a couple driving their car claimed to see a massive dragon or prehistoric monster lumber across the newly built road and slide into the water.
And that specific encounter fundamentally shifted the paradigm.
How so?
Well, Nessie transitioned from an ethereal 7th century water spirit into a terrestrial physical beast interacting with modern machinery.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it became flesh and blood in the public mind.
Exactly. And then a month later, a water bailiff named Alex Campbell reported seeing the creature, which kind of lent this official governmental weight to the phenomena.
Right, because he's an official.
Yeah.
And then we get the Holy Grail in 1934.
Oh, yes. The famous photo.
An English physician named Robert Kenneth Wilson snaps what is universally known as the surgeon's photograph.
Everyone has seen this picture.
Yeah, it's the grainy, iconic image of a small head and a long neck rising from rippled water. And Wilson actively compared his subject to a marine reptile that supposedly went extinct 65.5 million years ago.
But, you know, whenever you combine a global media frenzy with a desperate public hunger for proof, you create the perfect ecosystem for hoaxers.
Oh, entirely.
The demand for physical evidence was just so high that opportunists realized they could manufacture a reality, and the public would consume it without question.
Which gives us the infamous hippo hoax. I love this part of the sources.
It is truly bizarre.
So a big game hunter, a guy whose entire reputation is built on tracking dangerous wildlife, finds massive circular footprints on the muddy shores of Loch Ness.
Okay, so far so good.
And he publicly declares they belong to a 20-foot-long, soft-footed animal. He really believes he has found the undeniable physical proof of a living dinosaur.
But here's the problem. A real 20-foot animal walking on a muddy shore is going to leave a highly complex biomechanical record.
Right. So what happened when the experts looked at it?
Well, the zoologists dispatched to analyze the prints noticed the discrepancies immediately.
I mean, they must have just laughed, right? They looked at the physics of the tracks.
Exactly. Real animals have variations in weight distribution depending on whether they're accelerating or resting.
Makes sense.
They have distinct asymmetrical left and right foot pads. They have varied stride lengths. And these tracks lacked all of that biological reality.
They were just too perfect.
Yeah, the prints were perfectly uniform, identical impressions, evenly spaced.
Which means someone made them.
Right. The zoologists deduced the tracks were made by someone repeatedly stomping a heavy object into the mud.
And not just any object, a novelty umbrella stand crafted from a stuffed hippopotamus leg.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
It's just hilarious to picture someone out there in the mud with an umbrella stand. But I guess it shows something deeper.
It really does. The hippo leg hoax demonstrates the sheer vulnerability of the human mind when it is primed to believe.
Yeah.
The public wanted a monster, so a hunter found a monster's footprints.
The psychological mechanism driving this phenomenon is so powerful that even when the footprints were debunked, it didn't matter.
Nope.
And even decades later, when the famous 1934 surgeon's photograph was revealed to be a toy submarine outfitted with a sculpted head, the belief still did not falter.
Because that desire to believe doesn't just vanish because a footprint is proven fake.
Right, it actually scales up, which brings us into the 21st century.
So what happens when modern science collides with a century of myth-making?
Well, we are no longer talking about grainy 1930s photographs. The accounts are entirely modern.
Right, they're happening now.
In January 2020, video footage captured an unknown large object surfacing and moving against the current. And the most recent log from our materials is a sighting from January 29th, 2025 by an observer at Dores Beach. Over 1,000 people have gone on the record claiming to have seen something in that water.
1,000 people. The sheer volume of modern sightings creates a really fascinating tension with modern science.
It really does. Because science says no.
Right. A recent BBC News report outlines the current scientific consensus, stating unequivocally that Loch Ness is a phenomenon without a biological basis.
They've actually done tests, right?
They have. Environmental DNA sweeps of the loch have found no genetic material belonging to giant reptiles.
None at all.
None. And the food chain in the lake simply cannot support an apex predator that size.
So what do the scientists think people are actually seeing?
The prevailing scientific theory is that people are actually spotting giant eels, which are native to the waters and can occasionally break the surface in ways that mimic a serpentine neck.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting to me. Can we really just wave away 1,000 people across multiple generations and say, you all just saw some giant eels?
It does seem a bit dismissive.
Right. If you have that much eyewitness testimony, at what point does the sheer volume of eyewitness accounts become a data set that biology just can't dismiss?
Well, the conflict lies in the difference between biological data and psychological data.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Science requires repeatable, verifiable metrics. But eyewitness testimony is incredibly susceptible to a cognitive phenomenon called top-down processing.
Top-down processing, like an autocorrect.
Yes, exactly. Think about the autocorrect feature on your phone. You type a chaotic, misspelled string of letters, and the software instantly snaps it into a recognizable word based on context.
Even if it's the wrong word.
Exactly. Your brain does the exact same thing with visual information.
Because the brain is a prediction machine.
Right. When a tourist visits Loch Ness today, they are not a blank slate. They know the myth. They have seen the tour models.
They're already looking for it.
Yes, their subconscious is primed for a monster.
You know, you might be thinking, I would never mistake an eel for a plesiosaur.
Sure, sitting at home, it sounds silly.
But if you are standing on a foggy shore at dawn, staring out at an incredibly deep lake, and a 6-foot eel rolls on the surface, or a boat wake creates a strange standing wave, your brain isn't cross-referencing marine biology texts.
No, it's not.
Your brain autocorrects the ambiguous shape in the water and aggressively forces it into the shape it expects to see.
The environment provides the ambiguous data, and the cultural priming provides the monster.
Wow.
That is top-down processing in action. In a fraction of a second, an eel literally becomes a prehistoric beast in your mind.
And when you have hundreds of thousands of people visiting an area, all running that same cognitive autocorrect program, you don't just have an interesting psychological quirk.
No, you have the foundation for an entire economy.
Yes, because whether Nessie is flesh and blood, a giant eel, or an optical illusion, the impact of the creature is entirely real.
It really is. It is a $54 million annual industry.
That number still blows my mind. $54 million.
Yeah, the town of Drumnadrochits and the surrounding highland communities thrive entirely on an economy of possibility.
It's amazing. They have tourists coming in year-round.
Exactly. The capital flows through boat tours equipped with sonar, overnight hospitality, museum tickets, and merchandise.
I read in the sources they even have DIY kits where tourists mold their own clay Nessies.
Yeah, it is functionally a mid-sized corporation built on a creature that leaves no DNA.
And it forces a deeper question, I think. Why do we hold on to this?
That's a great question.
Why do we eagerly spend millions of dollars and travel across the globe to look at a lake, even when biologists offer practical explanations and historians completely debunk the classic photos?
Well, to understand the persistence of this behavior, we are actually examining a philosophical framework presented in an October 2018 General Conference address by Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf.
Okay, let's talk about that.
The text is a religious exploration of belief, but the underlying psychology it describes is universally applicable to how humans process faith in the unseen.
Right, because it discusses the mechanism of belief itself.
Exactly. It explains that trusting in a higher word leads to faith. And crucially, that this faith causes the heart to grow in love rather than fear.
The source asks a very direct question, actually. It asks, how does your faith help you to grow in love, not fear?
And that is such an important distinction because it frames belief not as a passive state of mind, but as an active transition into positive emotion.
So when people hold a deeply rooted belief in something they cannot explicitly verify, that belief inspires them.
Yes, it propels them forward on a journey. The text notes that as this love grows, it inspires positive action and a deeper engagement with the world.
So what does this all mean when we bring it back to Nessie? If you apply that philosophical mechanism to the 1,500-year evolution of the Loch Ness Monster, the entire history makes perfect sense.
It really does track perfectly.
Think back to St. Columba in the 7th century. The water beast was a mechanism of terror.
Right, it was literally killing people.
It was a demon that had to be banished. The belief in the monster was rooted entirely in fear.
But the modern iteration is the exact opposite.
Completely. Tourists are not flocking to the Scottish Highlands because they are terrified of being dragged into the depths.
No, they're traveling there to chase a sense of wonder.
Exactly. They want to stand on the edge of the water and feel like the world hasn't been completely mapped yet.
It's romantic in a way.
It is. Believing in Nessie today is an act of joyful, shared imagination. It allows people to look at a dark, cold lake and see magic instead of just biology.
And holding out hope for a prehistoric creature against all scientific odds helps people grow in wonder rather than fear.
Right. So the $54 million economy isn't built on scamming people. It is built on facilitating a collective love for the unknown.
The biology may be absent, but the psychological, cultural, and economic foundations of the Loch Ness Monster are incredibly robust.
Oh, absolutely.
It is essentially a masterclass in how human perception and the deeply ingrained desire for mystery can shape the physical world.
We have covered centuries of ground today.
We really have.
We watched a 7th century monk use a water demon to assert dominance. We saw how blasting roads through the Highlands in 1933 physically woke a sleeping myth and collided it with modern automobiles.
And we explored the biomechanical failures of hippo leg umbrella stands.
Still can't get over that. Plus, we looked at the cognitive autocorrect of top-down processing and the philosophical transition from ancient fear to modern wonder.
The evolution of the creature perfectly tracks the evolution of human curiosity.
It does. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Imagine if tomorrow scientists unveiled a revolutionary sonar technology, a system capable of scanning every single drop of water in Loch Ness instantaneously, creating a flawless, undeniable 3D map of the lake.
Okay.
And imagine that technology proves with absolute 100% certainty that there is no monster. Just old logs, cold water, and giant eels.
That would be pretty definitive.
Would the legend actually die? Or would people, within a matter of days, simply assume Nessie had discovered a secret, unmapped subterranean tunnel leading out to the North Sea?
Oh, they absolutely would.
I think so too, because maybe when we look for those perfect concentric circles spreading on the surface of the water, we realize that we need the mystery far more than we need the answer.
That is a fascinating thought to end on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking past the surface, keep asking questions, and above all, keep your curiosity alive. Catch you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.